Hello and welcome to Take 10. I'm Jennifer Johnson. With us in the studio today is Sarah Sirgo. Sarah is the principal of Woodlin Elementary School, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
You just recently received a very big award, so tell me about that.
I was selected as Outstanding Principal of the Year by the National Board Teacher Network of Montgomery County Public Schools, which is a group that supports and recognizes National Board certification teachers in our county.
That's very exciting. Were you surprised by this?
Totally surprised, very humbled. I've always been someone who supported the professional growth of my teachers, and so the fact that just doing what I think a principal should do got me recognition was something that really meant a tremendous amount to me.
Yeah, pretty humbling with all these teachers voting
Absolutely.
for you. That's really nice. Tell me what you think, in your opinion, what makes a good principal? And I know that changes from elementary to middle to high school, but in your field, elementary school, what makes a good principal?
Well, you know, I always tell the students, the teachers, anyone who asks when they say, what is your job? What do you do? I say, you know, my job is to make sure that the teachers are teaching and the students are learning. But in that job, I take on a variety of roles. So there's typically 5 main roles that a principal will serve in. You're an instructional leader, so you're making sure that the instructional program is running. There's a good core of learning and quality of curriculum that's in place. You're also a building manager. You have a lot of facility needs. You have a lot of needs to manage finances and staffing. But then, of course, you're a role of a professional developer. So you have to identify the needs and then provide the training and support for teachers to grow in their practice. And then, of course, the last 2 roles are critically important, which is setting the vision for the school and then establishing a cultural practice that can support all of those other things happening.
Now, how long have you been at Woodlin?
This is my 7th year.
7th year. So have you seen a lot of changes that you have implemented and also coming from higher up that have gone into place at your school?
It's a really interesting time to be a principal right now because we're in the middle of a curriculum reform. And so the kinds of practices that even someone like me and many of the people who have had more experience than me that we were trained to do as principals, those things have really changed. And so the tax of us on being an instructional leader, our ability to really know content, to really identify the professional development needs and make sure that those are all aligned to the school vision and the system vision is tremendously important at this point. I think I would argue more so than it's ever been in the past.
Right. It is a very difficult job. I don't think people realize how difficult it is to be a school principal. There's just so much to it now, and especially there's so much pressure now on, and I don't mean in a bad way, in a negative way, but it's a lot of pressure on our elementary school kids to learn a lot at a young age.
And it's interesting because I think underneath all of that, all of the expectations, all of the demands that we face, all of the constraints, the things that get in our way, if you will, really is the role of a principal is to establish the conditions. So that regardless of the context of the work can go on. And so much of that is centered on relationships. And people use that word a lot to describe the role of a principal. But truly, you spend a lot of time coaching. You spend a lot of time supporting, listening, guiding, leading others to be able to think critically about the work. And really they say that they pay principals for their judgment. And I think that's true more than anything else, which is that my job is to really figure out where everybody is and then what it's going to take to get them to that next level.
When you talk about staff development, and people throw that term out a lot, and I think the layperson, the mom at home, doesn't really understand what that means. So when you're talking about staff development, what do you mean by that?
So one of the things that we do in schools is we figure out where our needs are, where are the gaps in our learning as adults. And so if we have a particular area as a school or as a school system that we're working on, and let's say we identify it to be the ability to do quality small group instruction, which is meeting with kids in a small group, we would take a look at what we're doing currently, our current practice, and then what is our future vision for where we want to be. The professional development, the staff development, is the link between your current practice and your future practice. So it might be particular strategies you need to train teachers on. It could be having a better understanding of the components of a particular instructional lesson. It could be really identifying where the things are that teachers don't know and then figuring out what the best way is to get them there. So staff development could be workshops, but it could also be discussion. It could be inquiry. It could be anything that really elevates someone's understanding of the work.
Do you feel like you're kind of the liaison between the central office, the superintendent's vision, and your own school? Is that a fair way of looking at it?
I think a principal is, we work for the system, and so our job is to understand and support the vision that our superintendent has for our work, and then match that to where your school is. So what you will find is often is that principals behave and act differently and make different choices in different context, because each school has a different story.
Right.
And I think that's really important. And so our job is to say, here's where the superintendent wants us to go. And then we say, now where are we in relationship to that? And so the path that my school takes could be very different than another school takes. And that's a reflection of my leadership style. It's also a reflection of the culture of our staff and where our skill set is at the current time.
I know there's going to be a restructuring in the people who are actually above the principals. And how is that going to work?
So the current model has all of the community superintendents and directors of school support and improvement centered around a cluster model, which is a geographical model. So that means that 4 high schools, 4 or 5, and all the feeder middle and elementaries are clustered together. It allows the community superintendents to have a vertical picture of what's happening in a particular area and get to know families and the leadership, because the needs tend to be very similar. The challenges of that model, of course, are that we don't necessarily have level expertise.
Right.
So the new organization is going to really build on that, which is to allow there to be a high school, a middle school, and an elementary vertical superintendent model. So there'll be associate superintendents for the elementary school. There'll be 4 of those. And then they'll have support for their role. So it'll be more of a vertical model where elementary schools will be able to build more beyond the geography of where they're located.
Right.
But for their general similarities of being elementary schools.
So you'll actually have an expert that's specifically versed in elementary school education.
Correct. So the benefit of that, well, that we have 4 community superintendents who are going to become associate superintendents, and they'll be supported by 3 directors of school support and improvement that will be only working and focused on elementary school. So we'll be able to drill down and talk more specifically about how elementary schools are doing the work of leading and learning, and really build our expertise in that way. Doesn't mean we won't be collaborating with middle and high school,
right.
Just with regards to the leadership development, and the focus will be able to be elementary specific.
What would you say is the biggest challenge for principals, you as a principal and others that you see? What's the biggest challenge now for you guys?
I think that the challenge is that one of the things that we contend with are a myriad of demands. So we're confronted with lots of demands that are both on our time intellectually and on our time as far as what you have to get done in a day. And I think one of the biggest challenges of being a principal is prioritizing your work, because it's very easy to allow things that are not focused on the instructional core to get in the way. And so I think one of the biggest challenges is figuring out, as I make choices about how I'm going to spend my time as a principal, where am I going to get the biggest bang for my buck?
Right.
Really, what is the most important thing that I do? And I have a sign on the back of my door, so whenever I shut it and I can see it, it says, what have I done to improve student achievement today? And so really making sure that you keep going back to that as your primary purpose. But managing those demands is really challenging sometimes.
Right. The curriculum gets harder and harder, it seems to me, every year. Is that another big challenge for you, making sure the kids are able to keep up, making sure the teachers are able to keep up teaching the more difficult curriculum?
Well, I think the interesting thing about the Common Core state standards and Montgomery County's interpretation of Curriculum 2.0 to meet that is really not, good teaching is still good teaching.
Right.
Nothing has really changed about that. We've had to push our thinking about the way in which we get kids to certain outcomes. So it's not that it's more difficult to do the work, it's just more intellectually demanding to think about our work differently. And so being able to kind of unpack the content and being able to really think about what do we want kids to do and what's the best way to get there takes time. So time is that constraint that makes the work very difficult. But I would say overwhelmingly people feel like we're on the right path and we're getting more out of our students. And kids will rise to whatever expectation you give them.
Right, they don't even know it's changing.
Right.
Are you doing a constant assessment of, we're lagging here, we need to improve here, some of the kids aren't getting it here? Is that something you're constantly studying, or outsiders are constantly studying?
We collect data on student achievement in a variety of ways. So one of the primary ways we do is we look at outcome data. We look at how they do on tests. We have a number of both kind of formal tests that we administer, but we also have benchmark tests that are individual to kids. We can kind of monitor that. And then of course we have our perceptual data. We have how do the kids feel about being students in our school, and so we use our survey, our Gallup data to look at that. And then of course we have our implementation data. So we have the ability to kind of study how all of this is happening in our building. So we're constantly having that discussion, and schools are a live environment. And so we have formal times where we sit down and we evaluate progress, but there's a culture in Montgomery County Public Schools around interventions being focused on supports in real time.
Right.
So when your data comes back and you're not in the right place, what are you going to do to support that child?
All right, Sarah, unfortunately we are out of time, but thank you
Okay.
so much, and congratulations on your reward, and
Thank
your
you.
award, I should say.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for giving us a few minutes of your time. Remember to visit us on the web at the link on your screen. I'm Jennifer Johnson. Join us next time here on Take 10.